My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Guitarist Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.guitarist.com, and we're interviewing Marc Bonilla for our Remembering Ronnie Montrose special. How you doing tonight, Marc?
I'm doing okay. And by the way, it's Bonilla.
Bonilla. Okay, thank you for correcting me. I wasn't sure. Now, Marc, I understand from Ed Roth, who also played with Ronnie, that you and Ronnie go way back, and he was telling me that Ronnie actually produced, I believe, one of your first demos that got you one of your first record deals. So, could we start off with you sharing us how you, what was the time when you first met up with Ronnie, and tell us about that?
Well, I think it was back in 1976. I was in a high school band named Rock Island. This was in the Bay Area,
okay,
where we both lived. And through, I think, a contact at Leo's Music, Ronnie decided to produce us. And he and I got off to a really good start. I think our sense of humors were bizarre enough, and we got along really well. So even after that band broke up, which was quite a while, I was in the band for 10 years, he and I kind of found each other and did things for each other.
Wow.
Musically. This was just about when he was starting to get into the Mitchell Froom era, where he was doing one-man shows or two-man shows, and I was programming his micro composer and his Linn drums. And we'd be working on he would mod my guitar synth pedals, and then basically like I said, we had similar tastes in music, and so I was playing a lot of clubs in the area, and he said, "Look, man, we got to get you out of the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
What I will do is, on my own nickel, I'll take you down to the music annex, and we'll do a demo. We'll work on a demo project, guitar instrumental thing." And so we did, and as a result of that, one thing led to another, and that album actually got picked up by Warner Brothers, or Reprise. It turned out to be a Double E Ticket, which was my first album on Reprise.
Oh, wow.
In 91, 90. So, but he was, so a long time. He lived probably about a mile from our house where I lived, and my parents adopted him, basically.
Oh, wow.
Second mother and father, and he was always over at the house. We did, like I said, we were doing all types of different projects together. He had a thing that was we fashioned a head that he took the guts from a Steiner, like Lyricon, and ended up doing that. We did all kinds of different bizarre stuff, we were doing together. So we were kind of partners for a while at that time. And like I said, he was really my mentor.
Wow.
In those times, very, very close. I'm actually, all the people that he played with down here, I introduced him to, because he was a Bay Area guy. And I moved down to LA in 90, and so Ed Roth and so many other people, that I met from my band, because Ronnie had played with us, and he ended up picking up a lot of those guys and used them for his own band.
Now, you'd actually done some live shows with Ronnie, like in the 90s, didn't you? Like, were you part of his?
Yeah. Well, I was in Montrose for a while.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
We opened for White Snake in San Jose. I think was the first gig. Yeah, and we did a lot of stuff together. And then when I was doing stuff, and for my solo stuff, he would come on, and we had a band in 2000. I want to say 2007. 97.
Okay.
Was with Ronnie and Keith Emerson and Glenn Hughes, and we call it the Boys Club, and it was my guys. Ed was in the band, Mike Wallace,
oh wow,
Mike Mahan, all these guys, Bob Birch as well, and Joe Travers. So it was a great band. We did a limited amount of touring, but we did greatest stuff from each other's albums, and then all combined to do stuff. So it was great.
Now that's interesting. I had no idea you guys had actually done something with Glenn Hughes. That's cool. What was that like working with Glenn?
Oh, Glenn was great. I did an album with him. It was called Addiction. It was a.
I remember. I remember that solo album from way back then.
Well, that was me and him. That's he asked me to produce it after the Boys Club thing, and I co-wrote all the songs with him. I wrote all the music pretty much, and he wrote the lyrics. There was a couple of songs on there that I think Joaquin, I can't remember his last name,
That's all right.
wrote. Marsh had written phenomenal vocalist, and that just flows out of him effortlessly. And a lot of that stuff actually on film. I have film of all of that stuff, the making of Addiction. I've got all that on film.
Oh, wow. So now, let me ask you, Ronnie obviously was a monster on the guitar himself, so I know you're also a guitar player, Marc, so I got to ask, did you guys, what was it like jamming with him on the guitar? I imagine you had plenty of experience doing that.
Well, yeah, because we were so close, I was never starstruck.
Yeah.
First, but the thing that I got from him was his deliberacy in playing. In other words, he was a carpenter, and he built solos the way that he built houses from the ground up. He laid a foundation. He was never afraid to play low on the neck. Where most guitar players, as soon as they start, they're up high, wheedling away up there like a mosquito. And it's like Ronnie never did that. He started low. He was deliberate. He had attitude. He took his time. He was patient. It wasn't that he couldn't blaze on the thing. Of course he could, but his phrasing and all of that, the committing to the rhythmical heft of the solos and stuff is really what laid an impression on me. And you can easily tell when you listen to stuff like Down Without Pity, and you listen to how he played that song and the attitude in which he played it. It's unparalleled. No one else does it like him.
Yeah. Now I know you just played last week at the annual Ronnie Montrose Remembered concert. And obviously you got invited because, like you said, you're a personal friend of Ronnie's. You played with the man over here. So you were sharing with me last night when we were setting this up for today. You played, share with the audience the songs that you played on at the concert, because I know there was one from the Paper Money album, and you played a couple of Gamma songs. Is that not correct?
Yeah, when we did a Ronnie Contra reunion up at I think it was the Regency Theater up in San Francisco a few years back. With Sam Hagar.
Yeah.
All these guys, Joe Satriani, the original Montrose band, and the original Gamma band with Denny Carmassi and Bill Church and Glenn Letch and Davey Pattison. So I did the Gamma portion of it, and so learned all those great songs. So we decided to pull from that hat, and so we started with Fight to the Finish, and Robert Mason from Warrant did the singing on that. I always like to have him along because he's such a great vocalist.
No doubt.
And, and then we did so we did that from Gamma, then we did Voyager from Gamma, and we melded that with Starliner, which was an instrumental from Paper Money, which I've always loved. And so it was it was a cozy 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I got to share with you, Marc. Part of the reason, a number of years back, when I started interviewing guys for this Remembering Ronnie Montrose thing we're doing here, is I got a DVD of that show that you said you played out with. It also featured like Bill Church and Denny Carmassi and Joe Satriani and Sammy Hagar. And I got a DVD of that somebody sent me to review. And after watching that, I, like everybody, I'm a huge Ronnie Montrose fan, but like a lot of people, I wasn't aware until I watched that DVD that how much of a legacy Ronnie actually had. Because a lot of people, when they hear the name Ronnie Montrose, they think of those first two albums with Sammy Hagar. And after that, watching that DVD, I came to realize, you know what? There's a lot more music to the Ronnie Montrose legacy than a lot of people, even I, realized. And the more and more I dug into the catalog, I just thought, wow, this guy left a huge, legacy behind, as far as a body of work, as far as his music.
Well, he never wanted to rest on his laurels, For a long time, he refused to play any of the Montrose stuff. He wanted to play, guitar instrumental stuff. He wanted to play electronic stuff. He was into, bands like Kraftwerk and Ennio Morricone and different, all different types of music. And he wanted to explore those areas, and he had the cojones to do it. He didn't care. At that point, it wasn't like he didn't care about what his audience wanted. He did. He wanted to lead them into other places, and so that's why you have such a varied, an eclectic group of music from his catalog. From acoustic stuff to electronic stuff to rock stuff, because he wanted to explore all that, which is what any true artist should do in their lifetime. It's not just stay with the one trick that got him there and got him noticed, but also explore even some more of the unpopular stuff, because a lot of times it's just because he's ahead of their time doesn't mean that people eventually won't come around and go, man, this is great. So he was always, had the courage to pursue those things without ever thinking about album sales or attendance, any of those things. And I think he was ultimately respected for all of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even you have things like Guitar Hero, these video games where people put their music into that. And I forget the name of what it was, but somebody was telling me he did some kind of project where he made like a soundtrack years ago to like a video game before anybody was even doing that stuff, And
yeah, Mr. Bones.
Mr. Bones, that's it. And it's just amazing that the guy could be that far ahead of other people. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of other people kind of said the same thing about Ronnie, that, Ronnie had a pretty successful career, but he could have been a lot bigger if he would have stuck to like doing the same kind of formula that he had on those first two albums, but he did it his way, so to speak, and you got to respect the guy for that,
Well, and also I think you get a greater body of work from that. If you just kept recycling the same stuff over and over again, pretty soon it can be derivative.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
can become a caricature of yourself, and that's something he never wanted to do. He always wanted to push forward and push new horizons and new places.
Yeah, it's kind of like AC/DC. They say if you put on any two AC/DC albums, they sound almost alike. They're one of the few bands able to get away with that, but I kind of agree with what you're saying there, and it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, Montrose was almost the blueprint for a band like Van Halen. It's kind of interesting that Sammy would go on to join Van Halen, a number of years later.
Templeman,
same producer, yeah.
The parallels are inescapable. And Eddie took it in a different direction, as did everybody in the band. It was a different. It was definitely influenced by Montrose. And that's the thing is a lot of people don't realize how many bands that became much bigger were influenced by Ronnie Montrose. It's just everybody says, "Oh, Ronnie, oh yeah," because of those things. And it's hard to understand sometimes when you're when you have successive generations.
Yeah.
It's very much like if you witnessed a meteor coming into the water.
Yeah.
You were the first. You were the guy right there at point zero, and that thing came in and bashed into the water.
Yeah.
You saw what a big splash it was because there had been nothing before that.
Oh yeah,
They've done that type of thing, like a Hendrix or like a Beatles, where there was a complete drought of that type of music beforehand. Now, as those years go on, the ripples that emanate from that splash become less and less, intense. And so, by the time that successive generations hear it, they have been exposed to all of the music that was influenced by those original artists, like Ronnie, like Jimmy. And so to them, it was like, oh, okay, that's what that is, but you don't understand the impact of it when it first came out, how amazing it was if you weren't there for the initial splash. You only get some of the rings that lead to the end of the lake.
Yeah.
You're not there for it.
And, you can kind of, I'm sure, attest to this. Getting to take part in a great thing like you did last week at the Ronnie Montrose Remembered show, the great thing about that is it's put on by people that were, either, played with Ronnie, knew him personally, or, were greatly influenced by the man. And what I respect about that, I respect something like that being put together much more than a guy in a suit just saying, okay, we're gonna put a tribute together to Ronnie Montrose and we're gonna make some money off of this. Because I know Keith St. John, the promoter, I talked to him about it too, and he was. And you can really tell that he put it together, for the love of Ronnie, that he played with the guy, and it means a lot to him to kind of keep this thing going, as far as reminding people of what a great musician Ronnie really was.
Yeah, he was a pioneer, and influential to probably more people than the general public knows.
Yeah.
And like I say, I hear him in my playing constantly. Every day that I play, I can hear him. I can hear his voice in there, and I think that's part of what I feel is, I don't know if it's a responsibility, but it's simply something that I can carry him on a little bit in memory because of that. Because had he not been there for me, especially when I needed him, I wouldn't be half the player that I was now.
And I would imagine knowing him, not even before you ever really just even played with the guy, you knew him on a personal level. So to be around him, having him produce one of your first demos that got you a record deal, being around all these years up until his passing, he's got to have some kind of influence on you, even if it's something that you're not really aware of at the time. But you can't help be influenced by a guy like that, just picking up little things.
No, he's definitely, his DNA definitely rubbed off, and like I say, a lot of it has to do with the way that he would structure things, and I mean, I'm still getting manifestations of his influence in the writing that I do now. I go, hey, that's something Ronnie would have done. You know, and that it wasn't a conscious effort. It just comes out in your DNA. You know, like imitating your mother and father. You know, there's certain parts of it that just growing up in proximity, you adapt certain habits and certain, you know, character. You know,
naturally. Yeah. Just being around somebody. Now let me ask you, Marc, because I know you're also you've been a pretty successful solo artist in your own right. You're a singer and a guitar player, but I was curious, when you were first starting out as a musician, did you always kind of sing your own songs? You start out primarily as a guitar player and become a singer later on?
Yeah, I mean, even if I couldn't sing, I'd still sing them, you know. It was just, I always sang my own stuff, but I never really thought, I actually never really thought I had a great voice. And I was glad to hear years later that Hendrix thought his voice sucked too, so I felt bad.
Yeah. Well, you know, you sold a certain number of...
It wasn't until years later that people started coming up and going, man, your voice sounds, you know, your vocal. I said that they do, you know, because I'm totally my own worst critic when it comes to my vocals.
Yeah, I think everybody is, you know, but at this point, you know, you've sold a certain number of records. You've had a pretty, you know, you're still doing it all these years, so somebody's buying what you're doing, and the thing about it is,
fooling everybody. It's the thing is, look, truth be told, every musician, and whether they admit it or not, knows that it's only a matter of time before the mass public finally finds out what imposters they really are. This is how we become better at what we do, because of our self-doubt. It's important to have that. You know, like a morphine drip. Well, you don't want too much of it, or you start to hallucinate.
You start to believe
a little bit of it is good, because it makes you think, okay, I can't sit here and rest on my laurels. I have to move forward, which is exactly what Ronnie would do. He never rested on the rep of Montrose. You know, he always pushed himself to better himself, to do whatever, and I think that's some of the reason that I incorporated in my outlook is this directly resulted from his relationship with me.
Yeah, and you know, getting back to your ability as a singer, you know, your confidence in it or not. But the thing of it is too is there's certain people that kind of develop, you know, into being a singer. A lot of guys I've talked to, they tell me, you know, he started out as a guitar and really they just sing music because they can't find anybody else to sing their material the way they want it. And it's but at the same time, to me as a music fan. A lot of times, if you have a guy who's not necessarily a great singer, I mean, you take a guy like David Lee Roth, but he's a showman, and the fact that, you know, you're singing your own material, and it's a lot easier to perform it, have it come from the heart, if you know what I mean, as opposed to another guy just singing your lyrics that you wrote.
A lot of times, I mean, you look at so many. There's a lot of singers that write their own stuff that no one else could sing their songs as well as they could.
Like that's
he has a shitty voice, but it works for his manuscripts. It works for his narrative. It works for him.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of vocalists like that. Hendrix was another one. He wasn't a great vocalist, but he was great for what he did.
Yeah.
No one could sing them. You could have somebody that could do a lot more chops, but has no vibe and no grease to it. And that's the thing that is missing is a lot of times these days when you look at American Idol and you look at The Voice, everybody's looking at all the pyrotechnics that everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody's applauding within 5 seconds of the song. And it's all of the notes but none of the music and none of the commitment and the grease. And a lot of that has to do with the inconsistencies and the fallibilities of being a human being.
Yeah,
You need to have the faults, because that's what we all have, and that's what we identify with, is the non-perfection.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, those shows, as great as they are, and people enjoy watching them. See, I've always been I could never do what those people do, so I give them credit for getting up on TV and doing it. But at the same time, a lot of those people, you know, they have other people writing. Okay, we're going to hire a songwriter to write songs for you, and you go in there and you kind of do what they tell you. It's almost like it's manufactured. And again, there's a certain level of talent to be able to do that.
They know who's going to win by the end, and they've already got it all scripted out.
Yeah, and it's not, to me, it's not the same as, you know, like doing what bands like you guys did back in the day. You know, you go in the studio, you'd make a demo tape, you'd send it to a record label, you'd invite them to come out to your show, and you'd pay your dues in the clubs, and you know that's missing a lot from the.
When you're handed stuff, then you feel entitled. Yeah. When you earn it, you value what you get, and a lot of times you have to go through years of being in the garage and sucking for a long time before you actually start to get good. And that's where you learn your craft. You learn by making mistakes as much as you do by getting it right. And that's the thing. And there's no shortcut to that. You find a lot of these singers that are on the programs now, they're huge for 5 minutes, and then you never hear from them again because they were basically kind of spit out and manufactured, for ratings. And it's not really, and not all of them, but I'm just saying
in general.
Personal experience with someone where they couldn't do anything aside from their one trick that they do. And that's not real artists. A real artist should be flexible, should be able to be welcome new experiences and all that. So, that's just kind of the bane of the music industry right now is you're getting a lot of people that aren't really that good, but because of electronics, they sound.
Yeah. And now, having been a musician all these years, being in the business all these years, I got to ask, having all that experience playing with guys like Ronnie, and you've gone on to huge success playing with other artists. Have you taken that experience, like in the studio as a producer, to work with other artists yourself and kind of help pass the baton, so to speak?
Well, yeah. I mean, I always try to help, younger guys coming up. Like last week, I played did a show here in LA with Derek Smalls, Harry Shearer, and it was a great show. It was Steve I was on the bill. We had Paul Schaefer, we had Dweezil Zappa, we had Steve Lukather, Tenacious D, all these great people that came in to do this. And I had a friend of mine that whose son was just getting started in the music business, who was an aspiring songwriter and singer. So wanted to know if I would spend some time with him, maybe in kind of talking to him. I said, I'll do one better. We'll go to the show together, and he can shadow me, and we'll go through the whole process, which we did. And he's a great talent. He's a talented kid. His name is Ethan, and I think he's got a good future ahead of him. But you need to be able to be exposed to that. So whenever we can mentor, I think it's important for everybody to give back. And anybody that's worth anything,
will do so.
That's what Ronnie did for me.
Yeah.
Same thing. And you have to pay it forward or backwards or however you want to pay it, but pay it. Because we need a new generation of artists. That's what history is. You want to learn about the civilization. Don't go by the history. People that write the history, those are the people that won. Go by the artists that comment on it. And that's how you really learn about a civilization.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You always hear people saying rock is dead. I don't know that I totally believe that. I mean, it's been a long time since there's been like a real, what I would call a real major rock star. Probably the last major rock star I would say is maybe like Marilyn Manson, maybe Rob Zombie. There aren't acts like that back, but I still have hope that somebody's going to come along and we're going to be talking about a couple years from now.
Yeah, well, things cycle, and they reach an equilibrium. I mean, you look at when the Beatles came in, in 1963, 1964. The music before then was pretty mundane. It was all 1 6 4 5. Dun 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 dun. It was pretty much the same. I mean, there was some great music, but if you listen to the 50s, it was all that way. It was completely the same. And it was begging for a sea change. But that's the thing is. And the bands are out there, and that's one of the things now is the industry now is to a point where it's run on paranoia, and the only thing that beats paranoia is greed, but ultimately what's out over both is stupidity, because the NR guys know nothing about what's going on, and so you don't have the A&R like you used to have, but you've got YouTube and you've got Facebook and you've got other things where you can through social media discover new bands, and they're out there. They just have to be, they just have to be seen. They have to be heard, and there's probably just as many musicians and artists out there as great that just need to get heard. If it wasn't for George Martin, we would have never had the Beatles.
Oh yeah, and
it would have been lost in obscurity. None of it would have happened. It only takes one fulcrum, one moment in time to change civilization.
Yeah, and you make a couple good points there, like with YouTube and the power of the internet. I mean, I believe, like especially back in the early '90s when grunge was the next big thing, I believe a lot of record industries really ruined it for themselves, because now almost any band out there, especially a lot of independent bands, are hardly getting signed. There are hardly any real record labels anymore. And if you're on a real record label, as you know, Mark, it's because you got somewhat of a following. So you can say what you want about your ability as a singer, but the fact that you even are still on a record label and you got a label that's willing to sign you, it says something about you got a little bit of a fan base, you know, because you know, a lot of like I said, a lot of labels there are any they're not even signing hardly any bands like they used to back, you know, when you and me were coming up.
Right. That's true. But, you know, the thing is too is they really don't know what's going to sell. It's by sheer virtue of, you know, of just the luck of the draw and timing and all of those things. You know, so it's hard sometimes to know what's going to make it. The only thing you can do as an artist is you have to be honest. You know, if you go into a studio to make it to your prime motivation is to make a hit record, you've already failed.
Oh yeah.
If you go into an honest record, then you'll have success. And it may not be today, but maybe down the line when people discover it, it's like, man, this was great. How this skip leak through the cracks? You know, that's your obligation as an artist. You need to stay honest and to do what you do, not what you think someone else wants you to do. That's when you get into trouble.
Yeah,
and that's what Ronnie always did. Ronnie always did, you know, a lot of times contrary to popular belief, like, well, you should be doing this, he goes, yeah, well, I'm not doing that. That's not what I feel. I feel like this. And
yeah, you know, and I got to ask you, somebody that actually knew Ronnie personally all those years. You know, he did a great job of, like, when he'd cover other people's tunes, of like really rocking them up and making them his own. I mean, great example of that, as you probably know, is like, for example, on Paper Money, the song Connection. That was originally a Rolling Stones tune, and I actually listened to the original Stones version. Sounds nothing like the Montrose version, but there are people out there that actually think that's a Ronnie Montrose song. I have no idea.
That's because he owned it. And that's the thing, is if you're going to remake something, and I've done the same thing, and I used him as a template. Is if you're going to remake it, off my first album, Double Ticket, I redid Commotion and did it in a different way.
Oh, really?
The second album, I redid Whiter Shade of Pale with Glenn Hughes.
Wow.
And also I Am the Walrus. And on the new album that I have coming out, I've redone a couple of songs too, completely different than the way they were supposed to be done. But that's why you redo something.
Yeah.
There's no reason to redo it the same way that someone else did. That's just a tribute to it, you know. But if you go in there and you find out, you find a virtue of the song or whatever, something of the song, an element of the song that has been previously unemphasized, you know, by the original version, then you can magnify that. You can shine a spotlight on that and make it your own, or find out a different way that, yeah, this melody will work. If it's a good song, it will survive any arrangement. And that's what Ronnie did with Connections. Obviously what he did with Town Without Pity. It's what he did with Underground, which is another song off that album that was a cover.
Yeah,
He's done that with a lot of different songs. And that's what made him so great, is the fact that if you're going to do something, take the time to make it different.
Yeah,
and don't do it at all.
Yeah, and you may know this because having known Ronnie for so many years, but I'm going to give you a bit of a trivia question. There is also another cover tune on the original Montrose album from 1973. Would you have any idea what that tune would be?
Let's see. On the original, it was probably... I'm wanting to think it's... maybe it was it One Thing? Oh, no, it was Good Rockin' Tonight, right?
You got it. And, you know, and the reason I know that is they recently, about a year ago, reissued the first two albums, and I got them. They remastered them, and they got some great bonus tracks on there. And I was actually reading the liner notes, and it said it was written by nobody in the band, like a different songwriter I never heard of. And then I researched it and come to find out that was originally an Elvis Presley tune.
Yeah, it was an old 50s song.
And
20 Flight Rock he redid off of the...
Eddie Cochran, yeah. And again, that's my next question was, like, if you listen to the original versions of both Good Rockin' and 20 Flight Rock, they're much more of a rockabilly feel to those two songs originally. So was he a fan of that, like rockabilly stuff?
Yeah, I mean, he was a fan of anything that worked, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it was melodies, you know, and vibes of songs. That he said, well, I can redo this to be like this. And yeah, it's definitely what he did on Good Rockin', where you had, you know, and there was no reason to redo it as a rockabilly song.
Yeah.
It's been done. Let's try and put a different band on the hat, you know, and that's what he was good at doing. And like I say, no song featured that better than Town Without Pity. I mean, for one, he made it into an instrumental as opposed to Gene Pitney's vocal version. And he gave it this James Bond kind of swagger, to it that really defined, I think, his career. Is that song, in as much as he really did highlight the things that were important to him, which was attitude, which was atmosphere, and delivery. All of those things. He was patient. He left breaks between his lines, and really made you, taste every bite that he fed you, not just take a funnel and jam all the food down your gullet, and that's the thing, that the guitarist like David Gilmour can do, same thing. Incredibly, and just a phenomenal phrase, phrasing was just phenomenal off the top.
Yeah, David Gilmour, that's an interesting cat. A lot of people think of him, of course, from Pink Floyd, but like you said, I'm aware he's done some instrumental stuff too, and from what a lot of guys that told me that I talked to, they said, Ronnie was a real big fan of instrumental music. But see, to do instrumental music, you have to, because there are these shredder guys that, they put out these Shredfest albums, they sound like, a bunch of angry bees. So to put out an instrumental music, you got to really make every song kind of stand out on its own. And if you listen to some of the stuff Ronnie did, like you said, later in his career, it was very tasteful stuff. It was like each song really stood out on its own, even though they had no vocals,
Right. Well, it all comes down, and ultimately all of it comes down to storytelling.
Yeah.
You're telling a story. Whether you're doing it with words, whether you're doing it with paint, whether you're doing it with dance, film, or notes, it's subject to the same laws and applications as grammar. You have to have sentences, you have to have separation, you have to have punctuation, you have to have dynamics, you have to have emphasis, inflection, all of those things that you need to do it. And the guys that just come out with these, the wank fests that are just shredding, they're not the problem that here, because and guitar players suffer from this more than any other musician, is that the fact that they have to remember to always be a servant of the music and not the other way around. A lot of these guys have used the music to as a soapbox for their own egos, and it's not. And ultimately, it just leaves the listener cold. There's no story there. And what they're doing is they're reciting the alphabet. Well, there's no words in the alphabet unless you take them apart and reassemble them and use spaces in between it. Then you can have paragraphs, sentences, words, and all of that. That's the problem with a lot of the stuff, is no one's telling a story. And that's what Ronnie did best, was telling a story. And you need to, like I say, if you're not a servant of the music, and no musician, I don't give a shit who you are. If you think you're greater than the music, then you've got a problem. No musician is greater than the music that they're representing. And that's what you need to always keep in mind.
To fit the song, as they say. And now let me ask you, as a musician yourself, Marc, like you're a vocalist, a songwriter, guitar player. Do you find it any easier or more difficult, like when you're recording like instrumental music versus, because when you're doing stuff with vocals, the words gotta fit the music and that. Whereas if you're just kind of creating a instrumental piece, you kind of have that freedom, I would think, to just kind of just play the guitar and whatever comes out. Or what's that like for you?
It's the same principles. I don't think either of them is hard.
Okay.
If you're flowing and you're tapping into your muses and all of that, it flows out of you. There's no effort involved in it. Just a question of, a lot of times is trying to separate too many things. So, I've never had an issue with either of those. If it's lyrics, we have to kind of sit and work at them, but it's never one's never harder than the other, because it's all subject to exactly the same principles of storytelling. So it's the same for me. It's
okay. That answers that. Now, when you were playing with Ronnie and Montrose, I was curious. What were some of your favorite Montrose tunes that you got a chance to sing when you guys would be playing live in that?
Well, one of my favorites that he hardly ever did it was "We're Going Home" off the Paper Money album. I thought it's one of the most beautiful songs that was ever written, that he ever did, and he sang on it, actually.
Yeah.
And hated his vocal.
That's probably why he never did it, huh?
And I thought it was perfect for the song, and he did an amazing blazing solo in there that usually wouldn't work, but he made it work because of the feeling and the emotional content of that song. And he actually told me that he had fabricated some of the chorus by listening to Holst's "The Planets," the final movement of Holst's "The Planets," which was Neptune.
Wow.
I'm sorry, no, it was Venus. I'm sorry, it was the second. Some of the notes in there moved him to write the song, and he showed me one time, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. It is kind of like Venus from the planets."
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was an absolutely beautiful song, and no one ever does it live. I think the only guys that have ever done it live, because it's often overlooked. You know, and again, it's you got all the Montrose stuff, which always rocks.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, Bad Motor Scooter, amazing with the slide and all that. But when it comes down to what I love most about him, the most telling things, are the stuff that were probably the deep tracks like that, you know. So that's one of my favorite songs of all time that he did, was "We're Going Home." It's beautiful.
See, again, that's the great thing about putting on this Ronnie Montrose Remembered show every year, you know, that they also play the deep cuts as well as the hit songs. I mean, I bet there's a lot more people that, for example, have heard Rock Candy and Space Station Number 5 than, say, 20 Flight Rock, which is a great song. To me, you know, a lot of people may or may not know that, but it say it's not as popular a song as, like I said, as Rock Candy. But I'll tell you, the first time I ever heard that song, okay, I didn't care that Sammy Hagar didn't sing on it. It was just a great tune to me. And I kind of love the singer Bob James, and Keith St. John was telling me a couple of years back, you know, ever since Bob played with Ronnie, he's kind of fallen off musical landscape and kind of been in hiding, but he was able to get him to play one of these events a couple years back, and he came out of hiding, and it just got a great response when they did the song together, you know?
Yeah, I was there.
Wow. And that's the other thing about Ronnie, is great of a musician and songwriter as he may have been, he was also, I think, smart enough to surround him with other guys like you and Ed Roth and Keith St. John and all the other guys he worked with through the years that were as equally talented as he was, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think talented in different ways, too, because we complemented each other.
Well, that's what I mean, yeah. A lot of times, you know, I feel any band you really are talking about, that I kind of believe, for the most part, everybody kind of brings something to the table, if you know what I mean, and probably, you know, back when you played with Ronnie, that's a good example of that.
Well, you still there?
Yeah, I was just waiting for you.
Something bleaked on my thing. Yeah, I think that you know, everybody should bring something. It's all chemistry, and that's the thing is you know, when you have a great recipe for something, it's a little dash of this, a little dash of that, you know, a little bit of this, you know, and you need it in the proper balance in order for it to taste like the chef intended. So I think it's the same thing with bandmates. You know, it's like a sprinkler system. Everything gets green if you have them, you know, in the proper places where you cover each other and you bring something to the table, and the whole lot is green. You know, so that's what I think, you know, a good combination of players will do.
Yeah, I got to ask you, like, I know it's been a couple of years since Ronnie's passed, but, you know, you knew him for, I guess, many, many years. You played with the man.
Yeah.
So when you guys go and you do this Ronnie Montrose event every year and you get together, you know, as far as the guys that actually knew Ronnie and played with him over the years, it's almost coming like an old family reunion, coming back and playing these songs with each other.
Yeah, well, sure it is, because we have common interests.
Yeah, common bond.
You know, so, and everybody's a fan of the songs, you know, and so, yeah, it's great. I mean, the guys that I get together with that I bring in, which is Mike Wallace, Mick Mahan, Thomas Lang on drums.
Okay,
you know, and Robert Mason, you know, all these guys were old friends, you know, and so we get to share a part of what put us in the business to begin with. You know, you never lose sight of that. You kind of go back to your roots, and, you know, like we were when we were in 8th grade playing these songs. Whatever we were. You know, so yeah, it's always a celebration.
And, you know, also talking about Ronnie for a minute, you know, like I tell you, I started interviewing these guys that played with him or influenced him doing this Remembering Ronnie Montrose thing because somebody initially sent me that DVD with Bill Church and Sammy Hagar and Joe Satriani you were talking about earlier, and I was just impressed with, you know, there's all these great songs on here, but I never even realized. And then one of my all-time favorite tunes I never had any idea that Ronnie played on until I got that DVD in the mail to review was Free Ride. That's a great classic rock tune. And Frankenstein from Edgar Winter Group. I had no idea he played on those, and I thought, man, how could I not know that?
Yeah. Well, that's the first time I saw Ronnie was with Edgar.
Yeah.
You know, back in 1972. You know, and we were all going, "Who's this guitar player?"
Yeah.
You know, and even then he was standing out. And that's not easy to do with Edgar in the band. Because everybody's watching Edgar, but man, this guitar player, and yeah, it was incredible. And before that, he did a song with Kathy McDonald. It had Greg Douglas also on it. It was off her album Insane Asylum, and they did a version of Heartbreak Hotel. If you've never heard that, look it up.
I'm going to look it up. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. She sang the hell out of it, and you could tell it's Montrose in the background. The fact that he probably had quite a bit to do with the arrangement of it, because it sure sounds like something he would do.
Wow.
And again, it's making a badass remake of that song. So
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's he crops up here and there, and you can always tell it's him because of his approach.
Yeah, I mean, I got to ask, because I know when you played with him, Ronnie was a great guitar player in his own right, but when you played with him, was he the only one that playing guitar in the band, or did you get a chance to play guitar?
No, the funny thing about it with me was the fact that he usually didn't play with another guitar player. He would always say, I don't need another guitar player.
That's why I was asking that, yeah.
He's actually the only guitar player that I'll play with. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize. But it's because I listen to what he's doing, and I'm not getting in his way. And when it's my turn to do something, then he would stay out of the way. I mean, it's all about listening. That's
kind of interesting, because a lot of people think that like him and Sammy Hagar really hated each other. But I was reading Sammy's book, and he said, there's really no main beef with him and Ronnie, except for the fact that being that the band was named after Ronnie Montrose, Ronnie kind of had this attitude that nobody in the band should be bigger or have a higher profile than him, and the fact that Sammy was starting to get popularity at the time, I guess, became a bit of an issue, and then he decided to change singers, but it's kind of interesting that, like I said, that he would go on to join Van Halen,
Yeah, but everybody's attitude changes, you grow, you mature. Yeah. All kinds of stuff happens.
Yeah, and even in his book, Sammy was saying, he goes, no matter what anyone says about Ronnie, I always be grateful to him. He's the one that, gave me my first big break, so I can't say nothing bad about him.
yeah, absolutely.
And that's got to, like you said, that's got to speak volumes to you. That he must have thought an awful lot of you, because that's why I asked that question, because he hadn't really played with any other guitar players throughout his career. No. And so that speaks volumes of what he must have thought of you as a...
We had a mutual respect for each other, and that's one thing that I was always thankful for. Is I think he knew my potential at the time, and I was completely aware of his potential, and so we were fans of each other, and that makes a big difference, and you were having a conversation on stage, and you learn how to give respect and not throw shade, And so it's
and it's
that's why he would always agree to show up on my solo albums and stuff, and play on there, because we were old friends, and we knew that it would sound great. He was on Glenn Hughes' album.
Wow.
Play some slide on Justified Man, and so he was great. He always loved to play, when it knew that it was going to be a good quality project. And that, everybody knew, their place.
Wow. And that's why it's got to be a great feeling, like having known Ronnie all those years that you did. Like even when going back to when he produced your demo, like you were telling me, well, I wasn't really necessarily starstruck because I knew Ronnie. He's more of a friend to me than. So at the same time, when you guys are kind of coming up together and getting to know one another, and you see him kind of have his first bit of success with Edgar Winter Group and go on to form Montrose, that'd be a great thing, kind of seeing your friend have that kind of rise and see him come up like that and kind of come up along with him, Yeah,
well, it's always gratifying when the people that you aspire to, you end up on the same stage with at the same level.
Yeah.
It's nice. And I did that with Keith Emerson, too. I was partners with Keith for 20-odd years.
Oh, wow.
And it was, we were very, very close. We wrote together, did all things together, and you have to kind of sit back sometimes and go, wow, here's where I am. I remember where I was when I was in high school and watching ALP and watching Edgar Winter, and I was in rock heaven, and now here I am on this, hanging out with these guys on the same level, and which it never will be the same level for you. You're always going to have that sense of gratitude and inspiration from your heroes. You'll never consider yourself on the same level that they are because of that. I mean, you watch John Lennon when he's sitting there next to Chuck Berry on the Mike Douglas show, and he's trying really hard not to piss himself because it's Chuck fucking Berry.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same with Eric Clapton when he was playing with Carl Perkins on the Johnny Cash show. He looked like he was grinning like a schoolboy because it was like Carl Perkins, man. You know.
Yeah.
So your heroes are your heroes, and they'll never stop being those. You know. But sometimes you get to measure your own self-worth by sharing the stage with them.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. A couple of guys I've talked to so far, like I talked to Gray Golden from a Gray Golden Band. This other guy, Gene Baker. These were guys. They're musicians in their own right, and they make guitars. But these were guys that initially just met Ronnie selling him instruments, and they told me like that they would go on, you know, to have like a relationship for you know most of his career, most of his life. And these are just guys that sold guitars. So that's kind of everybody told me, you know, Ronnie was a really cool, down-to-earth, friendly guy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Down-to-earth. Yeah. He's an old, you know, just and big Denver Broncos fan, you know. So it's just it was, you know, and you find out a lot of these people that are held up in high regard and esteem, really underneath all of that hype and you know and image, they're just normal people like everybody else. They just have an interesting job, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to him, he's just, you know, he's not even doing what he does. And, you know, on that note, I got to ask, like, what do you think Ronnie would think of, like, if he knew that this Ronnie Montrose Remembered concert was going on every year in his memory? You think, like, would he kind of, like, he'd believe it, or he'd kind of be like one of these guys, man, I can't believe somebody wants to put an event on, you know, in my honor.
Well, I think he'd be very flattered. You know, I knowing him, I think he took pride in his work, and you know he was actually, you know, a humble cat when it came down to his own abilities and how he thought of his own abilities. You know, and I think that he would have probably been quite flattered that people had taken the time and the amount of talent that has taken the time to pay tribute to him. I think he would have been very, very touched. He was a very human individual and had a big heart, and you know, I think that stuff would have mattered a lot to him.
You know, and as great of a player as Ronnie was, the sad thing was, you know, he didn't necessarily, like, I don't know if he ever made the cover, like, for example, of Guitar World magazine, not that mattered to him, but, you know, at the time of his death, you know, the internet was kind of just coming to be. Do you think the internet's something he would have embraced and, like, taken advantage of?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so. But, again, I don't think that that's what really
mattered to him.
I don't think that mattered to him as much as his body of work, you know, and I think for all artists, you know, it's great to get the cover of something, especially if you deserve it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that ultimately, you know, you shouldn't let that deter you from your pursuits, your artistic pursuits, because eventually all those covers are going to get yellowed and stuck in a cardboard box.
Yeah.
Forget about them, but they're not going to forget about your music. And the music will be here forever, and so you better make sure your body of work justifies your existence on this planet.
Yeah. On one hand, interestingly enough, you know, the fact that he was that kind of artist, we got all this great music now to listen to. Sadly, he's no longer here, and like a lot of people that have passed on, a lot of times people, you know, they'll go out like the minute somebody died. Okay, I'm going to buy all the Montrose albums now. But at the same time, people are maybe hearing stuff that they had never heard before, and it's almost like, you know, you're hearing it for the first time, so it's really fresh, and you have a better appreciation for it.
Yeah, I think there's always an upside to that stuff, you know, and a lot of it is awareness like that, you know, and unfortunately sometimes it takes that in order for some people to
get their dues or their respect. Yeah.
But that's how humankind is. You can't cure normal.
Yeah. You just got to look on the positives now. Sadly, like I said, Ronnie's no longer with us. So I know he had his little battle with cancer, and it seemed like he was beating it. And I got to ask you, how surprised were you when you heard of Ronnie's death and the way he had passed? You must have been shocked.
Well, I wasn't surprised with the method because you know, it was just at the time I had been going through several friends that had done the same thing, and I knew why they'd done it.
Yeah.
And suicide it's a very, very multifaceted diamond.
Yeah.
There's no just quick and sharp answer to anything like,
of course,
well, that's a selfish thing to do. And yeah, we can all say that because it's been parroted by everybody. But there's a lot more to those things than than will meet the eye. And if you rush to judgment on those things, it's very easy to just condemn it. And I'm not, believe me, I'm not promoting it at all.
Oh no, I hear you. I mean, I tend to think a lot of times people do it.
All of the evidence before you can really understand the motivations and the method and all of that stuff. Yeah. And it was just unfortunate. It was an unfortunate circumstance. Ronnie had a lot of issues, from his past.
Yeah.
From his upbringing that he had to surmount. And they were tough things. He confessed all this one time to my mother, believe it or not.
Wow.
On the phone. I remember being in the house, and she said, she got off the phone and says, "Wow." I said, "Well, who's that?" He goes, "That was Ronnie." I said, "Is he all right?" He goes, "Yeah. He just told me about his childhood."
Wow.
And it happened. He goes, "Man, he is one, affected." He just said, "I feel so bad for me." He told me, and she also said, he told me never to tell you this stuff because he thought you would lose respect for him or whatever.
Oh wow, that's sad. That's sad.
You don't ever have to tell me. Yeah, to this day, she's never told me, and I've never wanted to know because that was something that he shared just between her and him because he needed to confess it to a mother. That's what he did. That's something that will always remain between her and him.
Well, that's cool that she would respect that, like that, and the fact that he probably
I didn't press it either. I just thought that's fine, and I've never asked her, "Hey, what was that thing about?" Like a statute of limitations had run out. It isn't that, and I don't need to know that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably rather remember Ronnie as the way you knew him or the last time you saw him or whatever.
Well, sure.
And the thing with suicide, like you said, I don't really judge nobody for it. I tend to think a lot of times, I mean, you never even have to know what you told your mother. A lot of times people do it because they have baggage from their past, like you said, or they're depressed, or very depressed. Yeah.
Everyone else, where they consider everyone else pain.
Yeah, or very depressed. But
sometimes it's actually valiant. It's actually valiant reasons. Even though it's a horrible thing. Sometimes the motivation is actually admirable. Strangely enough, as much of a dichotomy as that seems. But you have to know. You have to have all the facts before you.
Of course. Now, you were mentioning Derek Smalls a little bit ago. I know he's a bass player from Spinal Tap, and he released a solo album. Now, did you just play at the show there? Do you play on the album at all? Are you doing any shows?
I didn't play on the album. I came in afterwards. CJ Vanston asked me to join the band.
Oh, cool.
Which I'm a Spinal Tap fan, and after meeting Harry, he's one of the sweetest, most kindest, generous individuals on the planet.
Yeah.
Funny as hell. And the whole group is Toss Panos on drums. Obviously, Harry Shearer on bass, playing Derek Smalls. Keith England is singing. C.J. Vanston is the keyboardist and the musical director. And it's just a great core band. And we have Judith Owen, Harry's wife, on vocals as well, and she has a couple of spots in the show where she just tears it up. And then you have a 30-piece orchestra. So it's just a great family of people, all incredibly talented and all incredible senses of humor.
Yeah.
And it's one big yuck fest, And then we do this great music that they did. I mean, the Spinal Tap stuff is deceivingly good, and actually rather involved. Even though when you see it on stage, you see it in the movie rather. You think all these idiots, and all that. Yeah. But when you actually have to take apart the music, it's actually really good. It's really well written.
Yeah, what always interested me about that is they always dub a movie like a mockumentary, and I don't know if those guys actually really were musicians or they became musicians, but that was always the thing that kind of piqued my appeal. They make this funny movie, and then you find out one of the guys is Lenny from Laverne and Shirley. I'm like, oh my god, wow.
Well, a lot of artists can do more than one thing.
Oh, that's that. Yeah,
they can paint and dance, or they can act and play guitar, or whatever. And these guys all played their own instruments. They did all of that.
And see, Spinal Tap, I think, was really kind of by accident. They did the movie, and then it became such a hit, or people, even to this day, they're still talking about it. And then they went on to do a few more albums, and all the albums, like you said, you give them a fair, decent listen, they're not half bad,
No, they're great. They're actually really good. And Derek Smalls' new album is phenomenal. It's every tune on it is great. I mean, it's well done, well written. CJ did an amazing job producing it. it's really it's fun to play and it's fun to listen to.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it just because I heard some of the tunes and like you said, it sounds like something really fun to listen to, and that's what I miss these days. There's not too many.
Well, this is definitely an eclectic record and very funny. Lyrics are great, and the production and the playing is phenomenal. You got all these guys on it that were at the show the other night too, and just they bring it, and it's phenomenal. It's star packed, and the music reflects that. It's great.
Wow.
Great record.
And now, before we wrap this up, Marc, I want to ask you a little bit about what you're doing today. Now, of course, you told me you're currently working on a new solo album. Is it pretty much recorded, or are you just getting...
Yeah, it's done. It's just going to be mastering it here in the next couple of weeks, and then that's finished. It's called Celluloid Debris. This is my first solo album in like 25 years.
Oh, wow.
All the other projects I've done, with Danny Seraphin and CTA, which is ongoing, Eddie Jobson in UK, Keith Emerson, all of these different bands, I've written, we did albums, but was never a solo album, and after American Matador, which is my second record, I gave it a kind of a long break as I got into soundtrack writing and movies and TV stuff as well. And just didn't have the inclination to want to do a third instrumental record until now, after 25 years of playing with all of these players I played with and the opportunity to compose for symphony and all of that different stuff. They've all been combined on this album. So I've approached this album in a completely different way, where it's rock, but there's more guitar tracks than you've ever seen in your life. It would scare the bejesus out of any mixing engineer other than Ryan Green, who mixed this album. And the reason being, there's like 160 tracks of guitars on any one song. It would get up to that point because I'm treating it like an orchestra, where you have all of these people, but they don't all play at the same time. And there's hybrids of guitar tones. There's more. I've really kind of exploited the guitar tones on this album. There's tons of ear candy, and not for the sake of that, because it all comes down to composition.
Yeah.
All of this is composed, and there's not a whole lot of I don't think there's any wanking soloing going on. When the solos are there, they're there for a reason. They last as long as they need to, and then they're out of there for the next to make way for the next part. So I'm very, very proud of the way it came out. The people that I played it for, the consensus has been the same. So I'm glad that being well received, even in its preliminary stance. So, like I say, we're mastering it now, and then it will be, available hopefully soon after that. But I'm very, very proud of this.
And will people be able to get physical copies if they want?
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be better that way, because I have, like I did with my first album, there's a lot of segs and stuff in between that kind of set up the next record.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a humanistic element as well, since most of the tracks on here are instrumental, one vocal track. But if you want to get the flow of the entire thing, then it's important to have the hard copy of it as opposed to like the download.
Digital, yeah. I'm more of a fan of having a physical CD in my hand.
No, it's a concept.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a concept. It's the last 25 years of my life.
Okay, that's kind of what I was going to ask. As far as the writing, fact that you spent 20 years between solo albums, are these tunes that were already written that you had laying around, or?
Some of the stuff was initial ideas that I hadn't fleshed out until now.
Okay.
So yes, there's been a couple of tunes like that I finally got around to finishing and actually redoing almost completely, and then the rest of the stuff it's all brand new.
Oh, so, cool! Now the tunes
a lot of the things in between are things from my past that have bearing on the next tune. I've written a song for my son finally.
Wow.
From him being in the womb to him leaving.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool.
Entire arc of parenthood.
Now let me ask you, these older tunes that were laying around that you went back and revisited, how cool was that when you started the recording and these are tunes that have been laying around and you're kind of you have a more fresh perspective, fact that maybe they've been laying around and you're going back and revisiting.
And then also it was kind of a reaffirmation of, wow, this is still great.
That's what I mean. Like, it hasn't really. Some songs when you do like that, you go back and it's like, oh man, this is really aged, or it doesn't sound like.
Most of the stuff hadn't. There were some sounds, obviously, like sounds that I redid and was stuck on, like, wasn't quite ready to finish this, but now I am, and it came out and flowed
Yeah.
So, and again, there's a lot of different. There's a lot.
Hello. Hello.
There was a lot of variations. So, there's a lot of different variety. There's a lot of variety of music. So it's that's what I love about it. Is I've kind of really exercised every musical muscle in my body at some point.
Okay,
So.
and let me ask. The last thing I want to ask you about is you played on the 10 by 10 record, didn't you? As far you played, because that was a great album. I'll talk a little about the flow of the music. A lot of times when you have an album like that, where there's like a different singer on each track.
Yeah, great. The album, I did a song there called "Head On Straight," and it's kind of it's a bittersweet. And I really didn't talk about this too much, but they got the tune, and Davey sang on it. It was great, and so I kind of reconstructed it like Ronnie would have reconstructed it, and submitted it, right?
Yeah.
And then, from what I was told, the other guys kind of went, "Shit, we better go back to the drawing board. This damn song sounds, Bonilla's like gone full out here and made this thing sound like a real Montrose or Gamma song.
Yeah.
We better make ours, here, I guess a few people went back to the drawing board and bettered their contribution to it, which I'm glad if that's what really happened. I don't know. I was told that by a couple of different people. But at any rate, and I was real happy with the tune. However, something happened in the mix where they shoved my guitar solo up a bar.
Wow.
My guitar solo was actually late by one bar, and I was absolutely incensed by that when it happened. But no one seems to have noticed.
Yeah, you know why?
It's in time, so only I know what I really wanted to do. But because it's off a bar, it's not like out of time with anything. It must have. I don't know how that ball got dropped in the mix, but it did. And like I said, I was incredibly pissed off about it because I still think that it's a better solo when you hit the bar earlier where I intended it to go to match the drums.
Yeah, I think you're the only one.
Seems to have cared or noticed. So
I think you're the only one that's noticed, my friend. And the thing of it is what I was saying is a lot of times when you have an album like that where it's 10 different singers or different singer on every track, it's not very cohesive. But if you listen to the entire album, it's very cohesive. And the track you play on is a very great track. And Ricky Phillips, Eric Singer, they did a great job, I think, for the most part.
Ricky worked his butt
putting it together.
God bless him. He's a sweetheart besides. I love him to death.
Yeah, and let me ask you, when you got the final track back, and because see what people may not realize, the album was called 10 by 10 because you had 10 different singers, and then you had 10 different guitar players on each track, and they also had some tracks that Ronnie left behind. So when you heard the final track that you played on, I was kind of curious, and you heard Ronnie's guitar playing. It was kind of like for a Ghost of Ronnie, or did?
I mean, it sounded just like him.
Yeah.
I was actually honored to solo over him for once. It was like, wow, this is great. But I did it like he was a soloed.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And quite honestly, it's really what I would have done too. I mean, so much of his DNA was incorporated into my thing that I basically did it the way I would have done it anyway. But it sounds like Ronnie. Yeah. Because of the chord progression and all that. So again, it's a tribute.
And of course, when you're up on stage with somebody, you never know that that's going to be your last time playing with them. But when you think back to the last time you actually played with Ronnie on stage, do you have any special memories from that gig or anything really stands?
I think it was quite a while. That it's been. I think, and I believe it's on YouTube. It was us playing Starliner.
Oh wow!
At the Ventura Concert Theater.
Okay.
I can't remember if that came after. I think it came after Boys Club, and that was the last time that we actually did something on stage together. But it's great because it's he and I trading off on stuff, and it was all off the cuff, and it was, to me, it's one of my favorite videos because it's just he and I playing together, having a blast, and the band following and going at it. But the sound quality isn't great, but the vibe you can't equal. And it was two guys in love with each other's playing, and following and listening to each other, and having a intelligent conversation, and the crowd loved it. You know.
Well,
so, yeah.
Well, once again, I want to thank you, Marc, for being part of our Remembering Ronnie Montrose special. You know, I'm really glad that Ed suggested I reach out to you because I kind of got a different take talking to you than some other guys because, you know, you knew him personally before you even played with the guy, you know, and you had great stories to tell. And also the fact that I haven't really been able to talk to anybody that was featured on the 10x10 album. I'm glad we're able to kind of highlight that and talk a little bit about that as well. So it's really been great talking to you. And so I'll let you know when this gets posted. But do me a favor, if you enjoyed doing this interview today, let's keep in touch. And when you're ready to drop your solo album, I'd love to do another interview to really promote that and talk that one up. So
okay,
let's keep.
Yeah, I would be glad to do that because, like I said, I think it's an important record, and Ronnie's definitely reflected in there.
Yeah.
So
and see that's
I'll do that.
And see that's the point of talking to guys like you that actually knew and played with Ronnie, because as much as we want to tell a Ronnie Montrose story, we also want to kind of put the spotlight on the guys that played with him, because like I said, he was one of these guys that he did not just put the spotlight on him. He look at all the cast of great musicians he played with over the years. So that's part of what we're doing here too.
I'm honored to be part of that group.
Okay, well, I'll let you know when it gets posted. And like I said, you keep in touch with me and let me know when you want to do a follow-up interview when you get ready to drop the solo album, okay?
All right, great. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.